This is the Spyderco Manix 2 Lightweight S110V version. You can tell by the dark blue G10. I have to say, this is a really nice version of the Manix 2 from Spyderco. I've always liked the Manix 2. Not too hot on it when they had the big hollow grind in the original versions, but since they did this full flat, the Manix 2 family is really, I think, Spyderco's best folder, or one of the very best. I actually prefer this model over the Para 2. Just to go over specs, S110V blade. Oh, by the way, this is Marnie. She's helping me for this video. S110V blade, about 3.5 inches long, about 3 inches of cutting length because of the choil. And I think somewhere between 15 and 20 thou behind the edge. Again, I'm working on getting calipers. I'm just procrastinating on that. Dark blue FRN with Spyderco's, very common, and in my opinion, quite nice and functional bi-directional texturing with their symbol in the middle. Your typical Spyderco wire clip, very nice functional clip. I've usually not been too hot on this clip before because of aesthetic reasons. Sorry. I typically like their hourglass clip because I really think it looks really nice, and I've personally never had a big issue with it, but this is a very, very nice functional clip from just a practical standpoint. As you can see, ball bearing lock, just, you know, same general concept as the Axis, just slightly different mechanics. This knife is a permanently pinned construction, so you cannot take the handle apart for cleaning and such. I'm not positive why they did that. It's not a deal breaker to me, especially for one reason that I'll get to later, but I mean, I've heard some people really lambast this design. I haven't seen it be an issue in other people's knives, and obviously, even though I haven't had it for a particularly long time, it hasn't been that big of a problem for me, because especially the pivot is still your typical torque screw, and so those go together, and you can adjust the pivot. I suppose you could take this blade out and make like a Franken knife and put this in a regular Manix 2 handle, the G10 steel line version, which I actually might give that a shot at some point. But yeah, really solid knife, true to its name, extremely lightweight, very, very light. This would be an ideal knife for you know, the summertime. You're wearing light shorts or light clothing and stuff, you don't want to weigh anything down. This knife would be the ticket. Ergonomics. This knife is obviously designed really, really well for the saber grip, like this. So any type of cutting on cardboard or ropes, at least this is how I cut those materials. Extremely comfortable for very slice cuts. Has a choil up here. When I use the choil, I will usually choke up like this. I don't really see what you would cut like this. I'm not saying you don't. I've just never cut anything with this style of grip, so I'm not really sure what you're doing with that. It works well back here for power cutting, especially like you're doing wood and stuff, like I've said before. This grip is much more efficient than this grip, just because you get a lot of stress in the joint of your thumb because you have a leverage disadvantage since you're applying force here and you're doing your work all the way out here. So, but yeah, for slicing, very nice design, very easy to use the tip if you need to. It's got a fairly sharp spine. Like, you wouldn't cut yourself on it, it's broken, but for anybody, I guess, if you would want to use this for, say, like fire steels or something, or as a small pocket paring knife, this scrapes quite well. I've done some food cutting with this, and the spine will scrape pretty decently. What else? The steel. S110V, extremely, extremely modern. Extremely modern, high-tech, just insane steel. And I mean that in a good way. This is one of the highest alloy content steels you can find in the entirety of the knife industry. Huge amounts of vanadium. I believe it's somewhere around 8 or 9% vanadium. I could be wrong on that. 3% niobium as a grain refiner. Very high stainless capability. Extremely high carbide content. Even greater carbide content than S110V, which is frankly impressive that they were able to fit that much carbide in the steel. I have to say, in use, I've sharpened this knife probably about 10 times so far, just trying out various edge finishes and micro bevel finishes and things like that. One problem I'm having with the steel is that while the steel works, for whatever reason, I'm having a problem getting this steel extremely sharp. For example, something like this Spyderco Stretch in Super Blue, extremely easy to sharpen this steel. It almost sharpens by accident, in my experience, and it takes an extremely keen edge. S110V is pretty much the opposite. Well, I have diamonds, so it's not really a chore to sharpen. It works pretty easily with that, but it doesn't take an especially keen edge, which I was sort of expecting to some extent because I'm used to 10V and S110V. But I wasn't expecting it to be as poor as it is at taking a really, really keen edge. And I'm talking like hair whittling or beyond, which I can do that on so far every other steel I've had, from 5160 all the way up to 10V, S110V. But I don't know, it very well could just be my lack of sharpening ability. That's entirely possible, but I personally have not had great luck with extremely keen edges on this steel. Another thing to think about with this steel is, in my experience, the fine edge retention of this steel is virtually non-existent. And by fine edge, I'm talking about, like I was just saying, that extremely keen edge you can whittle hairs with. You can do the super duper crazy thin phone book paper curls, those types of edges. Even if you could get this steel to that level of sharpness, which I'm absolutely positive those who can, I just can't, probably because of my skill and a combination of my sharpening equipment, which I could probably use an update on. But it will just plateau out extremely quickly. Now, when it hits that plateau, in my experience, it holds that plateau pretty well. You know, like, which is to be expected with the steel. But it's just the carbide load seems to be so high on the steel that any hopes of fine, really, really fine, delicate edges is just gone in this steel. Still a good steel for those who like the really high carbide wear resistant stuff. It's just I'm not finding any practical benefit of this S110V over something like S110V, like I'm saying, 10V, or even especially my two favorites in this regard, CPM M4 and ZDP 189. I'm not seeing the magic. I'm probably going to do some more research, check some more stuff out. I know RJ Martin really, really loves this stuff, so I'm going to try and look up some of his stuff on it. Maybe he has some sharpening tips for it, so I can figure out how to just improve with this steel. I still don't dislike the steel, I don't mind it, but it's just certain issues that I've experienced. And keep in mind, that's my experience. If you guys have anything different, I would love to hear your opinions on what I could do differently. Last thing I wanted to talk about was really the reason I bought this knife. I didn't need S110V. I've owned Manixes before. I like them. But the real reason I bought this was because of the frankly absurd value you get in this knife. When I say this is a premium steel, I'm not talking about S30V is premium. You know, it's kind of, S30V is kind of a premium steel, but it's also become kind of normal, and it's really just a ubiquitous material now. S110V up to this point is pretty much unheard of in production knives, except for a few exclusive zero tolerance models. And I didn't really find those to be particularly impressive, because so far the zero tolerance models I've seen with S110V had that brazing. So it's where they took a different steel, like 14C28 for the main body, and they brazed, effectively welded S110V to the edge. And the problem with it, I found from seeing people's, is that they had to heat treat it really soft. And it's still, I mean, it was still a high carbide steel, it was still S110V, but it just wasn't as hard as I felt the steel probably should be to maximize its performance. And it was really just there, I felt, to be sort of a, oh, look what we made, look how cool this is, and didn't really have a whole lot of functional advantage. This, on the other hand, is totally different. Spyderco does do a really fantastic heat treat on their steels. They're one of the best heat treaters in the game. And they put it in a very, very functional useful model, and a very lightweight model, and an easily accessible model for $100. And that is just frankly incredible that they gave you this extraordinarily premium steel into a very functional pattern. So even if you don't particularly love the steel, the pattern of the knife is still a good knife. And all for $100. That, and made in the USA to boot. All of that was just extremely impressive to me, and I just really had to buy it before they went away. This is a regular production model, it's not a sprint run, but who knows how long they'll be around, and I just really had to get my hands on one. And I mean, hey, it's $100. Which is just, in my opinion, this is probably the single best value on the knife, current knife production level, just because of the materials, well, really the blade steel that you get for the price. It's just stunning. All in all, still a good knife. I still like it. Even though the S110V isn't wowing me, it's not a bad steel. It's just, you know, I'm still getting in the groove and feeling it out and trying to figure out what niche this would hold for me besides what it already is, which is, you know, ultra premium steel. Anyway, guys, that's my take on the S110V Manix 2 lightweight. If you guys have any thoughts about stuff, please put them down below, especially for any of you guys who are more experienced sharpeners, you know, any of you guys who've played with S110V before. If I'm messing something up, or if there's some secret mojo you guys have to really get a good keen edge on this steel, please post them down below and let me know. Thanks, guys.